Welcome to the Strangeology Podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Foran. From cryptozoology, ufology, and the paranormal, to legends, forbidden history, and more. Listen in and explore the world of the weird and unexplained. Join me as I look into strange and fascinating tales and unearth the truths and theories behind some of the world's greatest mysteries. Be sure to head on over to our HQ, strangeology.com, where you can check out our blog, episodes archive, gift shop, and so much more. Now sit back, relax, and join me as we get weird. Hey everyone, welcome back to the show. So I redid my intro a little bit there, at least re-recorded the audio. So hopefully you all like it. I transitioned into using a more robust program for recording, and I've had to spend the last couple of weeks kind of learning the ins and outs. So I hope you like it, and I think it's improving the audio quality a ton. I'm pretty happy about it. So it's making it sound a little bit more professional, if you know what I mean. My last episode was really well received, so thank you everyone for checking it out. My interview with Nick from California Creepypasta, and thank you for all the positive feedback. Doing the interview thing has been pretty fun so far, and I've got a number of interviews coming down the pipeline that I'm pretty stoked about. But don't worry, I'll still be doing deep dive research episodes too, and I do have some stuff in the planning stages for that. So I've got this huge list of all these topics I want to cover, and it's takes time, but we're gonna get to it all eventually. I definitely need to do an episode on the whole government Pentagon UFO UAP report that's supposed to be coming out this month, and as of recording this it hasn't yet, so we'll see. The other day there was a press conference where I can't remember who it was off the top of my head, but a representative from the Pentagon was being interviewed by the press, and basically he was like, yeah, I can't say anything about that yet. So it's like, damn. Anyway, so I had for this episode, I had the opportunity to have an awesome and rather extended chat with my friend Yami from the Cryptid Chat with Yami podcast the other day. So we had a lot of fun chatting about her background, Mothman, all things flying humanoids, and a lot more. So it's another interview that's quite long, so why don't we just jump into it, and I hope you enjoy it. All right, welcome back to the Strangeology Podcast. For today's show, I have the privilege of speaking with Yami from Cryptid Chat with Yami. We're going to get into some cool topics today, so definitely stick around for the show. I'm just going to do a quick introduction here, Yami, so here goes. Yami Gonzalez is the host of Cryptid Chat with Yami, a podcast featuring topics on the strange and unexplained, from cryptids, the spooky and paranormal, to true crime, strange history, and more. So much more. She is a longtime enthusiast of all things weird and is a fortean researcher and educator. So let me know, is there anything I missed or anything you want to add there, Yami?
Wow, I feel like you blew up my credentials. I'm like, wow, is that really me?
I guess I'm good at making people sound awesome. And,
I sound official now. Oh, snap. I'm listening. I'm like, you know what? Yeah. Right. You right.
That's awesome. Well, man, I'm stoked to finally do an interview with you, Yami. I feel like it's been a long time coming. You're like one of the first people in like the online cryptid community on Instagram to kind of reach out to me. And I think I had posted like some chupacabra artwork or something, and you sent me a DM and you're like, hey, I love cryptids. And then, you reach out to people online in this community and you're just like, wow, there's like so many people who have things in common and, different stuff that is just like all this weird stuff that people experience. And it's really cool to have this community based around that. So, to start.
I'm excited.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me. First of all, I just wanted to say thank you. It has been a long time coming. I can vividly recall, like, you were one of the first accounts that I followed because I was just trying to branch out and meet what kind of people exist in the community. And I think you were starting off too. And I was like, I gotta like this. And I just loved your work. I was like, this is so good. This is so good.
Oh,
and
thanks. Yeah, we both kind of started at the same time, didn't we? I think it was like April, shortly after like the pandemic, the lockdowns started happening. Yep. And I was like bored. I didn't have a job. I was just like, I've always been into like the supernatural, paranormal, cryptids, anything Monster Quest, UFOs. And I was just like, I'm going to go for it. I'm all in. So, Yami, what got you into the fortean world, and what made you say like, I think I'm going to start a podcast?
So, like you, I was in a very similar place, and I think like many of us, that pandemic had just hit, our lives were uprooted, and we had to adjust to a new normal and trying to go from, just talking to people on a daily basis, going about daily routines, to suddenly being stuck at home for who knows how long kind of a period. Right. For me, that was like devastating because I am very much a people person and I love to talk to people and be around people. So the idea of not being around people was not okay with me. So I instantly began to try to figure out ways that I could stay connected to people. And people were starting to do video callings and different sort of things, Instagram lives, all these things were starting to pop off more. And I began to start listening to podcasts during that time. And that's when I sort of kind of had the idea. I was like, well, I'm going to be at home for prolonged periods of time. I definitely have the time to start something if I wanted to do so. So that threw the idea of a podcast out. But then the question was, what would I even talk about that would be interesting for people to actually want to listen?
Right.
So I just began to think about the things I was passionate about, the things that I thought would be interesting. And instantly I just thought, what if I did a podcast about like the weird, the strange, the unknown? Like, I didn't know how many podcasts or content out there existed, but I was like, truthfully, that stuff is getting a lot more popular. And I feel like that's something I've always gravitated towards since I was little. So that's when I began to come up with the concept for Cryptid Chat with Yami. And I truthfully did not expect it to take off as far as it did.
Yeah.
But it has. And over a year later, I mean, here we are talking about all this stuff. So obviously it went somewhere, which is pretty crazy. But like, I've always been drawn to the strange and the unknown. I feel like it's always been a part of my life, through personal experiences and through just the things that, growing up watching TV, reading books. So it kind of blended this need, this like vacancy in my life with like something that I was passionate, and it just took off from there, really.
Yeah, that's awesome. And it's funny, like when I started doing Strangeology, I didn't realize there was so much out there on social media and the internet, like so many blogs and websites. There's all these investigators online. Like I remember early on you did an Instagram live where you were you were watching Nuke's Top 5 videos, I think, with your sister. And I was like, what is this Nuke's Top 5 thing? And I just like, every time he drops a new video on YouTube, I have to watch it. And like,
that was a cringy video, but we were locked up and having fun at that point. I mean,
yeah, what else are you going to do, really? Yeah, it was a good time for sure. So you're a co-host to another podcast, the Order 66 podcast, which is all about the Star Wars. So how has that been? And also like balancing time between that and producing Cryptid Chat.
So the idea for that just kind of happened organically more so than anything between the group of us, between me, Greg, and Matt. We just always nerded out always over Star Wars. It's something else that we just are passionate about. And we threw out the idea, like, what if we actually turned it into a podcast that we would do every now and then? Because each of us has our own things that we do within this community.
Yeah.
So at first I was curious too. I was like, I wonder how this is going to balance out. But the thing is, I think our dynamic works so well that it just kind of organically happened.
Nice.
Like, we do a really good job of just like maintaining our own schedules and things and communicating with each other, and we just pop out episodes every now and then. It's not necessarily like as like a specific set schedule, so it's
Yeah.
kind of fun. It's kind of fun and random to me, so I have like something to every now and then just look forward to. Like today we're going to talk about this, we're going to Star Wars a little bit, and it's fun having another outlet. Like, I'm a person that's very passionate about the things I like. So having an outlet to talk about these different things is really exciting to me. So I got a little bit of Star Wars, I got a little bit of spooky. It makes everything happy.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Yeah, it's great. Like I'm a musician as well. So, and obviously with pandemic, it hasn't really panned out to have a creative outlet there. But, you know, having this whole thing with like the cryptid world has been really, really big and important to have, I think. So, here's a pop quiz question. What are your top 3 Star Wars movies?
Okay, all right. So I've thought about this long and hard. I actually think we had this discussion the last episode that we did too. So my top 3. I'm really bad at ordering things in a particular order, but I think I'm gonna have to say Rogue One,
Good choice.
Return of the Jedi, and then The Last Jedi.
Ah,
Controversial third choice.
The most divisive one.
I know it's a little controversial, but it's actually a favorite of mine.
Right on, right on. Well, hey, can't argue with that. But yeah. Anyway, so back to the weird. Was there a particular moment in your life that you remember where you were like, yeah, the strange and unexplained is my thing?
I think it's just, I don't know if there's a particular moment per se. I think it just like as I began to grow up, that sort of began to happen. Like I began to realize that I really like this stuff. This is really interesting. I can remember these things a lot more than I can math or things in school. So I think it was more so like when I was probably like late elementary, early middle school, as I began to really like watch TV specials. It's funny that you mentioned like Monster Quest earlier, because that's one of the first memories I have of watching something on TV.
I was so stoked when that show came out. I was like, yes.
It's so good, so good. Through just the History Channel, the Animal Planet, Discovery Channel, all of these channels began to throw out all these things, and I just slowly began to intake this. And then I would go to my school or like local libraries and try to find books off of this content, because this is before like I used computers and stuff like that. So this is the way that I supplied my research.
Yeah.
But it just slowly over the years, it just continued to grow. And I like, the older I got, the more I realized that this isn't just like something that's cool. This is like actually a field where people legitimately study and research, and there's whole organizations and everything. Like that blew my mind. Like it's very organized community actually.
Yeah, no, it's pretty wild. Yeah, I remember when I first learned about the International Cryptozoology Museum in Portland, Maine, that's run by Lauren Coleman. And I remember when I first found out about that, and I was like, oh, I gotta go there someday. And it was like years and years ago, and I finally went in, gosh, what was it, like 2015?
Oh.
I got to go. And then a few years ago, actually, they had moved locations from downtown Portland into a new spot, and I was on tour with the band, and we had a show in Portland, and I was like, oh guys, we gotta go we gotta go to the Cryptid Museum. And I think it was on a Monday that we were there. Really odd day to have a show, but it turns out the museum wasn't open on Mondays, so I was super bummed out. But
I'll make my way over there. That's literally it's I have like a cryptid bucket list of places I want to go to, and that's up there on the places that I want to visit. So
Nice,
one
nice.
day.
Yeah, yeah. So you occasionally have your sister Alanis on as a guest to the show, and recently she did a Cryptid Chat takeover for your most recent episode. How was that? And do you have more plans for takeovers in the future, or maybe like having other people do takeovers?
My sister is the chaos in my life. Any episode that features her is always takes multiple takes to do because we always end up just cracking up laughing. We can never fully record it straight through. But she's a fun character, and she also is very interested in this field. Not necessarily as much as me, but like she leans more toward like the spooky side,
Mm-hmm.
and I lean away from the spooky side. So we have a nice balance, I think. But she had approached me with the idea of like, she's like, hey, what if I did a takeover episode? And I was all for it. I'm like, I fine by me. That'd be kind of fun to just sit back for once and just like provide commentary without doing like the research and stuff like that. So it
Yeah.
was pretty much all her for that episode. So it was a really fun time. I really enjoyed doing it. It was fun, very like relaxing in a way. But I'm definitely open to the idea of doing more takeovers. I never thought about it. And I'm like, this is a fun experience. And I like
Right.
the idea of having different voices on a podcast because even though it's my podcast, I do like having different dynamics. And I think it adds a little something different to the podcast. And then um, sometimes I wonder if people get bored listening to my voice all the time too. So having a different voice chime in opinions and whatnot just adds a little bit more diversity and fun, I think.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I mean, my first 10, 11 episodes is just me like screaming into the ether about like weird
Yep, me too.
stuff. And some people were like, "Hey, are you ever going to like interview people?" And I was like, "Yeah, like that's in the plans. I just got to make it happen." And like it's just been, it's a process. Like I'm more of
Hmm.
like an introverted person.
Hmm.
So reaching out to people to have on the show, I'm just like, I got to jump over that hurdle. And then, but the experience so far has been really cool. And again, thank you for coming on the show tonight to chat.
Aw,
Yeah,
I'm
I
excited to
really
be here.
appreciate it.
Literally, we need to. I'm on yours, and then you have to hop on mine
Oh,
one day. Like,
absolutely. Yeah,
there's so many people. I have like a list of people, and I'm like, we just need to get around to
exactly.
chatting with everybody.
Yeah, I know. Life is busy. It's
It
even though it's
is.
like there wasn't much going on, but
Yeah.
Strangeology has kind of become like my full-time job while I don't have a real full-time job.
Hmm.
So you recently traveled to Savannah, Georgia, to go check out some haunted locations and report back on the
Hmm.
show. Um, so how was that? And follow-up question, do you have plans to travel in the near future? Any spots you're going to hit pretty soon, or what's happening with that?
So I loved traveling, and when pandemic happened, I was really sad that I could no longer travel. Things are slowly starting to, open up in certain areas. So that was an opportunity we just kind of came up with last minute, like a small staycation, because Georgia's really not that far from us. It was just like an 8-hour road trip or so. Um, which I'm the worst person to have in an 8-hour road trip, but we managed. It's fine. It was a awesome experience. I'd never been there before. What I had done is I did a crap ton of research before we got there to see what areas we could hit up, what was important landmarks and things like that. And then I even did research on the Airbnb that we were staying at, which turned out to be a historic Airbnb. Well, it used to be a home built in the 1850s, 1860s. And I was like, this is wild and on its own right here. Like, we're staying in history. So the whole Savannah, Georgia is beautiful. It's so preserved from the original city. Like the infrastructure, a lot of the streets are pretty much the same. It's just, they maintain them over the years more than anything. It's like a time capsule. It's so beautiful, and so haunted, so terribly haunted. Uh, in the best of ways, I mean.
Uh-huh.
So in doing the research ahead of time, I had a good idea of the places that I realistically, with my very, very, very frightful personality, could visit and could not visit. So we ended up visiting a few of these places, and more so kind of just passing by some of them. We went to Moon River Brewing Company. We actually had dinner there. That was fun. It's a haunted brewery, and it's
Hmm.
pretty infamously known. It's been featured on a few different TV shows and specials and things like that. We didn't really have any weird experiences per se. The only
Hmm.
thing is, like, at one point the ladies took a trip to the bathroom, and the bathroom felt unusually strange. It was a very weird feeling, and
Huh.
we actually talked to our waiter and asked about, like, hey, is this place haunted? We've heard it's haunted. Have you had any experiences? Which is always fun to ask your waiter.
Yeah.
And he was a very cool dude, and we actually caught it on video. It's on my Instagram, but he told us an experience that he had there. Not necessarily with like a ghost or anything, but he said he saw what looked like a black dog
Huh.
in one of the upstairs floors, and that he disappeared.
Right on.
I was like, okay, I had never heard in all my research here of a dog. So that's really interesting that that was your experience. But he mentioned that other people have had experiences, and we were seated not too far away from the bar, which occasionally people spot like a lady dressed in like more like Victorian clothing sitting at the bar. We didn't see her,
Okay.
thankfully.
Okay.
But yeah, that was just one of the cool places.
Yeah.
There's so much history there. We passed by um a few very scary looking cemeteries that we dare not tread on because they were very old. The only one we went to was Bonaventure Cemetery. We actually took a walk through there, a very respectful walk through there. Um,
Nice.
and that was actually very peaceful and tranquil. It's very nice, which is a weird thing to say. The first time I'd purposely walked through a cemetery, but it was very much daylight during that time
Yeah.
too. So
Yeah. Oh, that's funny. Yeah, there's a cemetery very very near where I live, and my family and I will go walk through there occasionally, and it's always during the daytime.
Mhm.
And it's usually like super peaceful, and it's a really nice loop. But there's like one section of it in the back that we went down once, and we just get like the heebie-jeebies like going down. Yeah.
Ooh. You never know some of those areas. I'm
Yeah.
trying to pull up. I have the photos on my. I took a whole bunch of photos because I wanted to share everything with everybody when I got back from the podcast.
Nice.
I think the top spot that I really wanted to hit once we got there was it was a house. Here she is. The Sorrel Weed House, which is notoriously haunted. They actually document um stuff happening in the property almost on a daily basis.
Really?
Yes, and it's pretty wild. We didn't realize that they offered like tours and stuff like that, so we didn't actually get to go in it. The closest we got was we walked right up to the doorsteps and we took pictures around and stuff like that. And even then, I got this one moment where I literally felt like I was gonna puke, and I said, "All right, it's time to go home.
Wow. So
It's time for us to leave."
that was I was gonna ask, like, what's like the spookiest place you went to? That probably took the cake right there.
Yes, absolutely. It's a beautiful home. It just like it just there's something about it that's very very infamous. It has a whole story behind it,
Wow.
but yeah, that's
Yeah.
one of the places. It was fun though to get to travel and see these places that I had researched and whatnot. We actually have a trip coming up in end of July, beginning August. I don't think we've cemented the dates yet, but we're actually going to Mexico. the Yucatan Peninsula.
No kidding.
Yes, I'm really excited. That's more a vacation, but while we're there, I'm going to take it as an opportunity to explore the lore
Yes,
that
nice.
exists and any cryptids, any strangeness. We're going to be around a lot of Mayan ruins. So
Oh.
I'm very excited for that. And I'm definitely going to be using that as an opportunity to talk back on the podcast, to film episodes there as well while on in a whole other country. So
Oh, that's awesome.
I'm very excited. Fingers crossed that all works out. We're still in the end stages of like securing the exact place that we're going to be at. But I would like to be able to, as travel starts opening up, to start traveling to different places. It's so much fun being physically in locations rather than just researching them.
Yeah, exactly. I'm trying to make some plans to like hit some spots, like at least in New England this summer, since it's close.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah. I've got like a Florida wish list that I like in the meantime I want to try and hit up a few places around here because we have some interesting locations around Florida. You'd be surprised.
right, yeah. So, you mentioned that you've got some places you really want to visit. What are the like top 3, or heck, even top 5 places on your like cryptid tour bucket list, whatever you want to call it?
I literally have it written down because I'm that person. I'm a person, I find a really cool place and I'll write it down because I don't like to forget things. So I can't order things, so this is in no particular order per se. One of my top places, I just want to be around Area 51 at some point in my life.
I've got a story for Area 51 after you're done.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yes. Thank you. I'm so excited for that. Like it's so iconic. Like I grew up hearing about Area 51 as a child and now it doesn't feel as scary anymore. I just kind of want to be there and
well,
visit the areas.
Yeah, they got threatened by the Naruto runners and stuff for Storm Area 51. Now it's
yeah, I actually was live stream watching that going on during the day. That was a lot of fun to watch in itself. People that are a lot braver than I am. It was a good time though. Outside of that, oh my gosh, there's so many places literally just in the United States. And I can't even speak on a global level. Actually, there's so many more there. But some other places just off the top of my head, I definitely want to head up to New England because there's a lot of areas in New England that I'd like to visit. Salem, Massachusetts, I want to head up there just for the history, the lore. It's supposedly still pretty haunted and it makes sense with the dark history behind it. I want to, the top of my list, I need to go to Point Pleasant.
Yes.
I have to go to West Virginia.
Well,
I've never been and it already has my heart.
Yeah. That's like a rite of passage for cryptid enthusiasts, especially Mothman enthusiasts such as yourself.
Yes, that's the motherland. Like I have to visit Point Pleasant. So I'm really excited for hopefully Mothman Festival this year because we have all plans to go there.
Yes, fingers crossed.
So fingers crossed it stays that way. Outside of that, oh my gosh, there's so many places. There's so many places in the United States. God, I just have to make I just need to take a road trip of New England and then from there move to like the South. And then we're just going to hit up like the Midwest.
There you go.
And then the next coast because there's, if I really get into it, I'm just going to start popping off. But those are just like a few places off the top of my head. There's so many more. Anywhere that's iconic and not necessarily terribly spooky is fair game for that bucket list.
Awesome. I mean, those are some good spots for starters, definitely. Cool. Well, so my Area 51 story.
Yes.
Back in 2018, my partner, my fiance and I, we got engaged on the trip actually.
Yeah.
Oh,
So we were driving through the Southwest. We flew into like Phoenix, and then we like headed up all throughout Arizona. And I was like, we're out here. We need to drive out to Rachel, Nevada. So it was like day 4 or day 5. I can't remember. And we had just done Mount Zion in Utah, and we had an Airbnb booked for Vegas that night.
ooh.
But we were like, okay, we got to drive up to Rachel. It's like 3 hours north of Vegas. So we did that, and we visited what is it? ET Beef Jerky. It's like a little pit stop.
Oh, I love it.
We got these like little like alien driver's license cards, and we took a picture in front of the extraterrestrial highway sign on the road that goes out towards Area 51. But it was funny, like I was like looking at the skies. My fiance was driving, and I remember seeing these. We were getting like pretty close to like where the roads are that lead to the base, and I remember seeing these, like I think they were F-16s, like flying up above, like doing these like crazy maneuvers. And I was like, is that a UFO? And like, no, it's not a UFO. It's it's an F-16. But we were coming up over this like mountain pass, and then all of a sudden it's like the radio just like went out, and there started, it was, I assume some kind of like military like broadcast like jammer signal or something like that. There's all these like weird beeps and stuff. I took a video. I'll have to post it sometime on my Instagram, but it was a really like surreal experience. And then we like got out over that hill, and it's just like this straight shot for like 20 miles in this like desert salt flat. And then you get to Rachel, Nevada, and you like come to town. There's this like decaying steer carcass like on the side of the road, and then like the town that says like Roswell or Rachel, Nevada, like population whatever, it's like 30 people and aliens with a question mark. So it was really fun. We stopped at the Little Alien and checked out some of the paraphernalia and the stuff in like their little museum section, and took some pictures there. There's like a little stone monument from like the Independence Day movie back in the 90s.
That's cool.
Which is really fun. But yeah, it was a wild experience. And the back gate where people go to, I didn't realize it was a little bit further up the road. So we didn't actually like make it to the gate, and I was kind of a little scared to like go all the way there anyway, because I didn't want to get arrested by the guards if I accidentally like stepped over the border somehow. But
fair enough. Yeah, that's honestly a fear I would have too.
Oh, yeah. But on one of the like the previous roads, I think that leads to, there's like a ranch, and then I think there's another access road to the base, and we saw like one of the buses like off in the distance, just like hightailing it through the desert, because you can see the sand plumes and like the dust just like flying. So yeah, that's my Area 51 story, but it's not super duper exciting, but it was
an
a good
adventure.
Time. Yeah, absolutely. It's like you're there. It's like maybe like 10 miles away over a mountain, but like you're there.
You're in the general area.
Exactly.
The energy is still there.
Yeah. That was definitely like a long time bucket list item for me, at least, but highly recommended if you find yourself out in the desert. You definitely got to hit it up.
Oh, I have to. Why not? If you're already roaming the desert, might as well, right?
Exactly. And then you can go stay in Vegas and be like, oh, casinos.
Exactly. There you go.
Yeah.
It's just a little further off.
Exactly. Yeah. And so speaking of UFOs, you recently had an interview on Somewhere in the Skies with Ryan Sprague. That's kind of like big time. How did that go?
I was sweating bullets. I was very surprised when I was approached by that, and the fact that my name was dropped and recommended to him for that particular episode, for the Puerto Rico episode. I was extremely humbled and gracious to have had that opportunity, because his podcast was one of the first ones that I listened to. And it's so awesome, so good. It was an awesome experience. Ryan is super awesome, super cool. It literally went just so like naturally. Just it was just
Cool.
us chatting, and the listening to the end product of it, how it was pieced together with all these other amazing people. It was so great. I'm so proud to have been a part of that. Like that was such a great tribute to the island, and I really brought like I felt like it brought like a lot of awareness that to stories and things that maybe not everybody would have been aware of was happening in this little tiny island in the Caribbean.
No, that's awesome. Yeah, I checked out the episode and it was like really, really well done. I haven't listened to as much Somewhere in the Skies as I should have, but I've checked out a few episodes and like it's top notch, like production value, and just the way he puts together episodes is like, wow, that's like a whole other level.
I know. I'm like, I aspire one day.
Yeah. Oh man. So, all right, let's get a little weird for a second.
I literally live in the weird. Yes, let's do this.
So you and I have chatted together back and forth before about our own personal experiences with like the strange and unexplained, things that like don't really have rational explanations. Do you mind sharing a couple of your stories with my listeners?
Yes, I have become a lot more comfortable sharing these stories, I think, with this community, and that's a wonderful thing too, because once upon a time ago, it wasn't so easy to share these kind of stories because people would think you're crazy or they wouldn't believe you. But now it's a lot more accepting uh, for you to share these kind of stories. So ever since I was little, I have had weird experiences, um, and didn't necessarily realize that they were weird until as I started growing up. I realized, okay, this isn't normal. But it seems to have some sort of family ties, which is always fun because you can't avoid that. You can't avoid that in any capacity. I didn't ask for this. I was born into this. But since I was little, I began to have like experiences with just seeing things that weren't maybe necessarily there. For other people, I had a story of an imaginary friend when I was a little kiddo at like 3 years old that ended up causing some mischief in our townhouse at the time. And we realized maybe it wasn't an imaginary friend, but luckily it seemed to be just in that particular home, because once we moved, it stopped. Thankfully.
Yep.
But I've had like a few weird experiences throughout my life. Again, like just seeing things that aren't necessarily there. I've had an about with like what I assume is sleep paralysis, because that helps me to sleep better at night if I think it's that. And just like strange feelings, etc. But I've also, when I was young, I had an encounter with like what I now know is like a big black cat in Colorado. When we lived in the military base there as a child, it kind of like creeped up on us. So me and my sister and a neighbor were playing, and scared the living daylights out of us because I'd never seen a cat that big and fully black. I thought I was going to die as a child. I was like 7 years old. I just remember screaming.
Oh no!
And luckily it got scared off by a neighbor's dog. But that was it's one thing hearing about things, and it's a whole other thing experiencing them.
Right.
So I feel like I don't want to say privileged, but I guess been privileged to have had a variety of different strange encounters.
Sure.
Like we had when we moved back to Florida. This is probably like now it's like a good solid like 6+ years ago that we had a UFO experience here in Florida. Everybody in my town and the surrounding area saw strange lights in the sky, and we walked outside, and yes, we saw them. Like, wild.
Yeah,
that was the wildest thing ever. And then me and my mom were just staring at them, and then we just sit and watch them disappear.
Yeah. Were they like kind of nearby your house? Did they fly over? like just silently, or did they kind of blink out?
They were, I was on Facebook. This is funny. And I'm on like a community page, right? And the community page for our county started to like go crazy one day. People were asking, hey, what are these strange lights? Does anybody know? Is there like a lantern festival? What's going on? So I started seeing these photos popping up, and it was sure enough 3 lights in like a triangular sort of formation. They looked almost like a reddish orange kind of color in the photos alone, and the videos that I saw made no sound whatsoever in any of the videos that people posted. And when people were describing where they were located, I'm like, this is a good maybe 5-10 minutes from my house. We should be able to see it if we walk outside. Like
Right.
here's our home, and it was probably off on the right hand side, just a few streets down. Like it was that close. So my mom and me were the only ones that had the courage to go outside. And as soon as we walked outside and we looked in that general direction, there they were. 3 lights, triangular formation. Again, no sound whatsoever. They kind of like flickered in a way. But it didn't appear to us that they were moving, or maybe they were moving very slowly. And we just stayed and watched them for probably a few minutes, and then they disappeared.
Wow.
And then I went to the Facebook page, and people reported seeing them further down south. So I guess it seemed like they sort of traveled down
Okay.
the
So
area.
just out of your perspective.
Exactly. Yeah. That was, I was like, I cannot believe I'm actually looking at this right now. This is like, I'm actually watching this in front of my eyes instead of on a TV screen or on YouTube. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, no, it's something else when you actually experience a sighting like that in real life.
Yeah, it was like amazing, but also like that, I won't lie, that night I was like partially terrified. I'm like, please, Mr. UFOs, please don't abduct me. That would be a really bad experience. I've heard that's traumatic for people. I'd rather not. Please don't do that.
Yeah, that's the big fear. UFO shows up in your backyard, like, don't take me.
I was like, please don't. No, it's okay. I didn't see you. It's all right.
Right. Yeah, thank you for sharing those stories, Yami. That's great. So Florida, where you're from, has some weird stuff going on for sure, as we all know.
It's just a weird state in general.
Yeah. Who is your favorite Floridian cryptid?
It's got to be Skunk Ape. Like that's our staple, but like that was the first one that I like really knew of.
Right.
And I think the one that I like know the most of, I guess, in Central Florida. Well, not Central Florida. There's really more when you're thinking of Skunk Ape sightings. It tends to gear more toward the south, but there have been a few sightings around the Central Florida area, surprisingly enough. So I gotta say Skunk Ape. It's the idea of a Bigfoot type creature roaming around my backyard is actually very exciting.
Yeah. Well, I guess it makes sense. You know, there's connections with, hairy humanoid creatures in swampy areas. You know, you've got like the Honey Island swamp monster and that kind of thing. Do you happen to know of anybody or a friend of a friend, or have you ever heard stories from people that are like, yeah, I saw Skunk Ape, he's real?
I have a friend of mine that he actually wrote to me once I started doing the podcast and stuff like that. And he was like, hey, I had an experience of something and I don't know what it is. He's also like an enthusiast of this sort of stuff. He's like, I think I know what it was, but I don't, like, in that moment, he was like, I don't even know if it sunk in what I saw. But he described that he was fishing one day here in Central Florida, just in like a little swampy area that he frequents quite a bit. He's pretty comfortable with that area. He's never had issues. No wildlife outside of just like birds, maybe some like wild hogs, etc. Like nothing strange for that day. But he described that he was fishing and he felt just like a strange feeling of being watched. And that when he looked across the river, it was like beside a tree that he saw. He's like, Yami, I swear, like I saw. And he described basically what to me sounds like Skunk Ape.
Yeah.
Before he absolutely hightailed it out of there and booked it so fast. And I don't blame him at all. Like his you could tell, like, even as he was talking about it, he hasn't really talked about it too much. I think he actually went on one podcast that I told him to share his story with. But again, it's one of those, like, it's a whole other thing for you to hear these stories and then experience it. Like it seemed like he was pretty unnerved, but that was so wild to hear that somebody that I knew had an experience in an area that wasn't too far away from where I live too. Like, oh my gosh,
yeah, that's
crazy.
Wild. Yeah, absolutely. It's it kind of reminds me of like, gosh, I can't remember the name of the YouTube channel right now. I probably should have looked it up before we started the interview. But are you familiar with the Skunk Ape from Mississippi video that's on YouTube, where this guy's in the woods and he comes up upon this like hairy looking, very large statured creature that's like tearing apart like the base of a tree in this like swampy area? And and it's just like, yo, when people see that kind of stuff, it's just like, it's kind of reality breaking.
Exactly. And yeah.
You see like commentary online of people that are like, oh, like why do we have all these like potato cam videos when there are any videos? And like, oh, if I was there, I'd hold the camera steady and I wouldn't run away. Like, no, I think you probably would when there's like a 8 to 9 foot tall like thing that could just like rip you in half. Like, yeah.
Exactly. In that moment, you can't necessarily say how you react because we're humans, like fight or flight.
Exactly.
Like, you won't know until you're in that position. So I literally don't blame anybody who has camera footage that's blurry as hell, because like I don't blame them. That's okay. I probably wouldn't even think to pull out a camera. So the fact that you even tried, kudos to you, sir.
Yeah. Just think of how many people have sightings that don't even think in the moment to be like, here's the thing, I gotta take a picture of it or a
video.
There's gotta be so many. It's wild to think about. And then there's also the aspect of, you know, there's the theory of is Bigfoot like interdimensional or something, and like what are you messing with if you try and like approach one, you know? It's
exactly. No, I'm good. I'll just keep a respectful distance.
Yeah, I think I'm in the same camp. Do you have a preference like for certain types of cryptids that you like researching, like avian or water-based? Like, what's your favorite type?
I'm a sucker for a winged boy. I love flying cryptids. Like, I don't know if it's just like because I like birds and whatnot, but the idea of a cryptid in the sky is equally terrifying and also like beautiful at the same time to me. So I just have that's I think my preference, but I also think that's just because Mothman influences that a little bit. I love Mothman. I love the Thunderbirds. So I would say I lean towards a winged cryptid, but I also love the cryptids where we're not sure if they're a cryptid or if they are something, like you mentioned, interdimensional, even supernatural.
Yeah.
Because then that adds a different element to it.
Right. When did you realize that Mothman was like your man?
When Mothman pierced my heart with his red glowing eyes. I think I was in high school. I had heard the story of Mothman, but when I was a kid, it was more scary to me than anything. And then as I started growing up, I'm like, actually, that is really cool. That is really cool. That description, awesome. 100 mile per hour wind speed, amazing. What a legend. So I just think as I got older, I just learned to appreciate Mothman. And one day I was like, wow, Mothman is it. Like, I don't know what it is necessarily about Mothman, but I think it's the combination that it's so mysterious. it's potentially a winged cryptid, but also potentially interdimensional, supernatural. We just can't pinpoint exactly what it is that really, really draws me in to like that particular sort of storyline.
Gotcha. Yeah. The mystery, the intrigue.
Exactly.
Mothman's got it.
Yeah.
Mothman's got it.
Yeah, he's become such an icon too lately. Like, good for Mothman.
I love it. Do you think there's a connection between like different flying cryptids around the world? Like, for instance, some people have drawn connection to like the Jersey Devil and Maryland's Snallygaster, and like reports of those cryptids or creatures, whatever they are, whatever you want to call them, at least from what we know, they go back further in time than Mothman in Point Pleasant in West Virginia as a whole in the late 60s, you know, or so we think. And like there's reports of Snallygaster going as far out as like West Virginia in the early 1900s. Like allegedly people found like Snallygaster eggs in like a nest somewhere way back when. And like, what are your thoughts on this? Is there some kind of connection between all these different flying winged creatures?
I think there is. So like the more I've done research into winged cryptids, and just especially once you even like leave like North America and you start looking at like a global level, there are so many cryptids or legends or stories globally that sound very similar. There's very similar features, very similar reports, very similar eyewitness testimony that we have. And like you said, literally from all across history. So I don't think that that's necessarily a coincidence. Like, I don't think that it's a coincidence that that here in North America, we have like sightings of like winged, like bat-like creatures, but then I can go to the Philippines and they also have sightings of these large bat winged like humanoids.
Right.
So I do think that perhaps maybe what we're experiencing, whatever phenomenon, whatever creature it is, maybe it's more than just like a specific territory. Maybe it's more of a global phenomenon, and we just haven't put it together with like the evidence. Right. Whether it's a physical creature, whether it's a phenomenon, I feel like I tend to lean more toward like it's some type of phenomenon. The fact that it's in so many different locations leads me to more believe that it's not necessarily a physical creature, but something that people are experiencing. But yeah, I can't discredit. Like, I mean, if we look even at the Native Americans with the legends of the Thunderbirds, like a lot of the Thunderbird stories and these like almost like dinosaur-like creatures in the sky, like, I mean, it lines up with things like the Van Meter visitor, with like, we literally have accounts of like large, like dinosaur-like creatures, like trying to pick up a kid in places here in like the United States from
in the burbs.
Exactly. Like, so I don't think that there to me, there has to be some type of connection there. And I'm really curious to see like if we mapped it all out, what patterns we would see. But just in listening to the different stories from different cultures and different places in the world, to me there's too many similarities to feel like to say that they're not related somehow. Perhaps we're seeing the same things, or perhaps human beings, maybe there's just something that we all simultaneously equate to the same thing. I don't know.
Right.
It's the mystery behind it.
Yeah. And certainly like John Keel looked a lot into this, and like his whole ultra terrestrial like kind of hypothesis really kind of adds credence to the idea that there's some kind of phenomena out there it might not be like physical, you know, it might be from somewhere else, and that we just can't really perceive on this earthly plane that we're
exactly
locked into.
Every now and then it slips through, and terrifies a village or two, but
right. Well, that kind of leads pretty good into my next question here. Are you more of a like flesh and blood type of person? Like, are you in that kind of camp for most cryptids like Bigfoot and Mothman? Or do you think, at least with some of them, there's something more? Like, are they ultra-terrestrials?
Yeah, so I feel like it really depends. It's like a cryptid by cryptid case. Like, it's a case by case, really kind of a deal. Because I feel like there are some cryptids that absolutely could be flesh and blood. Like, when it comes to like Bigfoot, I teeter back and forth. I feel like scientifically it makes sense for a creature like that to exist. Absolutely, to me. I feel like with, like, for example, Nessie or like Champ, I absolutely think there's a creature like that that could exist or has existed and we thought was extinct, however the case may be.
Right, coelacanth.
So, exactly. So, like, I do think that there are some cryptids that are physically tangible living creatures, whether it be a species that we never identified or we haven't just discovered yet, or a species that perhaps existed a long time ago and we thought disappeared and it never really did.
Right.
But there's definitely some cryptids and some some legends that I lean more toward the fact that it's something beyond even our human understanding. It's some type of phenomenon, whether it's interdimensional, like extraterrestrial, like super dimensional, all these dimensions.
Yeah.
Like, there's definitely an element to that in a lot of cryptids, because I think it just easily it's a way to explain, like, why haven't we found them?
Yeah.
How can they
evidence?
exactly?
Yeah.
How do they seem to come and go and disappear, and like why? Like, it would explain a lot of that for sure, absolutely. And it would explain a lot of people's experiences and like the physical effects, the emotional, mental effects that have also taken place with people that have experienced certain cryptids or certain phenomena. So I think it really just depends on the particular cryptid that we're looking at.
Right.
But like I said, like, for example, Bigfoot, I go back and forth. It really depends on the day. Like, I want so badly for Bigfoot to be like a physical creature, because I just think it would be so cool. But maybe, I mean, for all we know, there could be things that are almost a mixture of both too. So
Right. I love that the episode of Futurama where, it's 1,000 years into the future and they know all these different intergalactic civilizations and Earth is one of them. And then I think they're on like a camping trip one day and Fry winds up running into Bigfoot, and then like no one's discovered Bigfoot yet, even like in 1,000 years. And that was just so good. Okay, so serious question. What artistic interpretation of Mothman do you like the most? Do you prefer Mothman with antennas or none?
So I know that Mothman's descriptions vary, and technically the earliest descriptions of Mothman weren't even moth-like. It was more bird-like than anything. And really, like, the majority of the descriptions from eyewitnesses that we get are more bird-like than anything. I just really love the idea of this cute looking little guy with a moth and moth antenna and big wings, tiny body, just no head, just like these little piercing red eyes. Like, to me, that's how I sleep at night when it comes to Mothman. Like, picturing it's the artistic interpretations that have taken place, I think, more so in the last like 4 to 5 years when it comes to Mothman, because before everyone used to picture him as like this menacing, terrifying thing, and now he's all derpy and cute. I like that version of Mothman, although I know it doesn't equate with the original sightings that we tend to get with Mothman.
Right, exactly. And can I get an opinion on the Mothman statue of Point Pleasant?
an iconic gem. You know, there was a lot of artistic interpretation in there. I personally never realized that Mothman never missed leg day. He does squats every single day. I was not aware that there was that much cake to Mothman, and that he was that ripped and shredded. Interesting. I love the statue. It's iconic.
Yeah.
It's so cool. It's regardless of whether Mothman looks anything like that or not, it's still really cool.
Yeah. I love all the pictures that people take behind Mothman.
Yes. It's like you take two obligatory photos. The one in front of the Mothman statue, very respectful, very wow. And then the one you take behind the Mothman statue, which is not necessarily as respectful, but also very much wow.
Right. That's great. That's great. So Yami, you're from Puerto Rico originally, like your family's from there.
Mm-hmm.
And I loved those episodes that you did on your show about like all the legends, and it sounds like there's tons of high strangeness and lore that's tied in with the culture and the island, like chupacabra and UFOs. Can you talk about some of the stories that you've heard and researched, and like what's your favorite legend overall?
There's so much on the island. Like when I first started Cryptid Chat, I knew that I wanted to do a series based off of Puerto Rico because I just felt like a lot of people didn't really know much more further than the chupacabra. Like that's pretty much what most people equate Puerto Rico to.
Yeah.
When it comes to anything strange. But having grown up with my family, having been born on the island, raised on the island, I had heard so many stories through them that I knew that there's stuff there. So when I began to do my own research and then sit with my family and like talk to them about like what have they heard, people they knew, etc., that just kind of like that fully cemented it to me. I'm like, I was born in a very weird island. Oh my gosh, there's a lot of strange things that happen. But I mean, Puerto Rico's home to a variety of different phenomenon that happens, and this has been stuff that has been going on since before anybody arrived to the island outside of the natives that were there. They were already experiencing strange phenomenon. The island itself, it's a small little island in the Caribbean, but for some reason it had some type of high significance to the native populations in the Caribbean, to the Tainos. And there's evidence that shows even the Maya might have traveled as far as Puerto Rico to visit the island because it was revered as a holy place with a close connection to the gods.
Very
whatever the gods may or may not have been. So, and I mean, we get early descriptions from like even my least favorite person that ever existed throughout history, Christopher Columbus. But he wrote in his journals like experiencing strange lights.
Right. Yes.
From the island. So like we've definitely had a rich history of strange phenomenon, from lights to UFOs to disappearances to ghosts, etc. And then it just all kind of like culminated with that chupacabra. Like that was like that was the pinnacle of the strange and the weird, and that was also the height of when technology was taking off with computers, so it really went viral for the first time.
Right.
The chupacabra did, and it brought a spotlight to the island. But when I began to do research, there's so many crazy stories. Like there really are so many crazy stories, from disappearances in the El Yunque rainforest to disappearances in like the fort that we have there, and Morro, like Spanish soldiers just disappearing on the ships and never being found, which is always fun. All the way to like, I'm trying to think of like the weirdest things that we have. There's reports that there's like an underwater UFO base.
I'm pretty sure I've heard
part
about
of the
that
island. Yes, that has a lot of crazy UFO sightings and whatnot. So there's a lot of weirdness going on down there when it comes to UFOs, strange lights. And then I'm trying to think, we have like of course, legends like La Llorona and stuff like that stem from, I mean, whether there's some truth there or whether they're just stories passed down. But the people themselves are very religious, but there's also heavy elements of like the supernatural and whatnot. So I think that's why these stories tend to carry on forward and why we so openly talk about them.
Yeah.
For that reason, like it's people like feel comfortable to talk about these things, to talk about encounters they've had with ghosts and stuff like that. So when the chupacabra happened, that was like everyone who had a sighting was like, let me tell you about the chupacabra. He's wild. It's crazy, this thing. Like this alien creature like thing that's terrorizing around and killing our dogs and livestock and not harming people, as far as we know. It doesn't. I think there was only one particular encounter with the chupacabra where somebody described that like it might have been like just like gashed by the spines on the back, but maybe not intentionally, just as it swooshed by.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's literally so many. Like we covered a few of them in the episodes that we did, but I'm sure if we really, really dove into it, we'd find even more. The goal is to, when all this is said and done with pandemic, to go to Puerto Rico and to do a more extensive dive there.
Nice.
And visit some of these places and talk to some people and see what else we can hear from the locals themselves outside of just like the research.
Oh man, I can't wait for that. That'll be awesome. What do you think is one thing about the fortean world that most people misunderstand? Like, we're all a bunch of weirdos.
Yes.
What's like the biggest thing that you've noticed from the average skeptic that just like writes this kind of stuff off?
I think the biggest misunderstanding is that I almost want to say it's that we're weirdos. Like, I think that when most people think about this type of genre of research, of study, etc., the tendency is to just want to write us off as we are crazy, we are like delusional, there's no, that's not scientific enough. Like I think that tends to be the reason why most people are skeptical. Like it seems on the outside looking, like when you are on the outside looking in, it seems like a lot of the things that we discuss and research seem crazy. They seem outlandish. But I think that's a huge misunderstanding because like the more I've gotten to know this community, like they're so organized. There's, like I said, organizations exist within this community, like highly structured, highly funded, highly equipped. There we have incredible researchers, authors, content creators, like people that are like very, very devoted and very focused, very scientifically minded, very open-minded people that are just driven by this passion for this or driven by personal experiences. So I think I think that's our biggest misunderstanding. People, I think it's the quickness to want to say, all right, that's crazy. That's too outlandish. Because I think, and I say it all the time, like we fear what we don't know, and we're essentially here embracing the unknown. Right. So to somebody outside looking in, they're like, you're wild. Yeah, that's too much. Yeah. No. I'll stick to the stuff that I know exists, the stuff that I know how to deal with, while you guys are looking for things that I can't wrap my head around. So I think that tends to be more so it. But when you really get to know people in the community, like I honestly think like this community has so much to offer, and I'm so glad to see like as attitude shifts happen and technology advances, how like we're becoming a more accepted and more respected field of science and research. Like it's amazing to see like the boom in books and just it's so great. I love to see people be taken seriously for the things that they're passionate about, because I think that's how we'll start to see breakthroughs and we'll start to see evidence and other stuff. And that just makes me very excited to think about personally.
Oh, exactly. Yeah. It's like being in the Matrix and like, people, skeptics are kind of like the blue pilled or whatever. Is that the right one? I can't remember. But no, that's all very, very true. It's the people on the outside just kind of fear the unknown. And, I think with new information coming out all the time and like this whole thing with like the UFO disclosure thing and like the report that's supposed to come out in a few days and all these news stories about UFOs, and a lot of the times people are just like meh, like they don't care, or there's still people like trying to like be like, oh, it's nothing, it's just birds or Chinese lanterns, and the evidence doesn't really seem to suggest that is the case for the unexplainable unexplainable ones. But I actually think that's a perfect example. Like now we have our government here in the US that is beginning to slowly declassify all these documents, and we have these like very, very like respectable like eyewitnesses that are coming forward to share these stories, and we have video footage and all these things. I think that's slowly starting to rock the general public's view on a lot of these things. Like, oh my gosh, well, if the government is kind of acknowledging it and kind of talking about it, maybe there's something there. Hold up a second. Yeah. Like we've seen weird stuff in the sky.
Yeah. Okay. Like, wait, that's that.
Yeah. You guys are all catching up now. Cool. So we're getting pretty close to the top of the hour. Just a few more questions here before we end the regular show. My final question for you is, out of all the high strangeness out there in the world, what keeps you up at night the most?
A lot.
Uh-oh.
As a person, as a person with like a high anxiety level on a daily basis, a lot keeps me up, truthfully. But when it comes to like, I have like categories of things that keep me up at night. The scary stuff that keeps me up at night is obviously anything spoopy or paranormal, which is why I try not to delve into that too much, because that to me is an area where you really can't control that and do much about that.
Yeah.
And
like
that scares me. So that'll keep me up at night for sure.
Yeah. It's like the phenomena. If you look into the phenomenon, it looks back, and sometimes in a not nice way.
Yes, I've experienced that. So I'm very careful with that.
Right.
But then there's also like what keeps me up at night because it's exciting and I'm excited about it. And that's just like anytime new research comes out or any new sightings or videos, like right now, this whole UFO disclosure, I'm counting it down. I am so excited for this to happen. Whatever may come about it. We may get nothing big. We may get something big. Who knows? But so I'm like, I have two categories, the excited and the scary.
There you go. That's awesome. So I've got a few questions from the audience, if you don't mind answering those.
Oh, I'm excited. Look, let me pull up. I forgot to bring this little guy. Nobody's going to see him, but I had little Mothman.
Oh, nice.
There you go. He's here.
The office manager.
Yes, he is. He does a good job of keeping desk control.
Yes, I have my Indrid from Cryptid Comforts.
I have one from Cryptid Comforts too. His name, we call him Lurk, and he lurks in my loft bed.
Nice. All right, so our first question here comes from Ice Age Man Powboy 78, and he asks, when did you start to like cryptids?
Okay, so that again, it's probably like when I was a kid. I want to say, I feel like around like 8, 9, 10 years old was like the golden years of when I discovered cryptids and the strange. And that was purely thanks to television and books.
There you go. All right, our good friend Greg from All the Weird asks, and also your co-host from Order 66 podcast, asks, what's the coolest / craziest cryptid you've learned about since starting your podcast? And there's a lot of crazy cryptids out there.
There's a lot of really crazy ones. There's a lot of really funny ones too, in my opinion. Wow. I hate that this is the first thing that came into my mind. So I actually think I want to say it was Greg, the one that threw this in the Discord chat.
Oh no, I know what this is. Go for it.
The one from Brazil.
Oh boy.
Is it called the chupacu?
I think so. The sucker of the unmentionables.
I thought I had heard everything, and then I heard that one. I was like, I knew nothing this whole time.
That's great. One of my favorites was the space penguins, which aren't necessarily a cryptid, but when I came across that story one day, I was just like, what?
They're so cute.
Yeah. Jonathan Dodd Draws asks, what's your favorite cryptid encounter story?
Ooh, oh my gosh, there's so many like good stories out there from eyewitnesses, like, which I just want to side note, like, if anyone ever has stories, please share them with people. Like, it's so important, I think, to document these things, but also like it adds and builds to these profiles and the research that we're building for these cryptids. I still think like one of the most iconic to me cryptid stories is the original Mothman sighting, you know, where we have our two couples out on their nightly stroll in their car out there in the TNT area, and lo and behold, they come across this terrifying humanoid creature, and they get in their car, and this thing is speeding after them, and it's huge wingspan, and they're describing these like big red eyes, and I mean, it's still to me incredible, like the fact that it's like keeping up with them as they're speeding for their lives into town. Right. Like that's still to me one of the coolest, like, because it's just so like, maybe part of me is just like, it's so cinematic. Like
it is. I was gonna say it's like straight out of a movie, and it's
yes,
it's such an iconic thing. Like I gotta wonder how many like horror movies and stuff were like inspired by that. Like one thing that comes to mind is like, have you ever seen Jeepers Creepers?
I've seen bits and pieces, but I think I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Like the monster, and it's like this demon, and he like flies around and stuff, but nothing like Mothman otherwise.
Yeah,
but,
just it's so iconic, like the headlights shining, illuminating this creature, like it's so cool. And just cool, of course, Mothman, you know.
Yes. Okay, and then final question comes from our good friend Mothboy Matt. And then shout out to Matt. Matt asks, what is your favorite paranormal encounter?
Ooh, I don't have too many favorites because I like to stay away from this area. But there are crazy paranormal stories. Like, as much as I've tried to stay away from this area, I've seen and heard a plethora of stories from people I know, from people I don't know, etc. I think the craziest ones to me are anything related to like poltergeist. To me, poltergeists scare the living daylights out of me, because it's just like this like entity, spirit, energy that it's just like like it's just uncontrollable and just like wreaks havoc essentially.
Yeah.
So like, I mean, I've seen crazy poltergeist like stories. I can't think of one off the top of my head because I have like every Nuke's top 5 is like popping up in my head right now. And he tends to have a lot of those. But wow, there's like, oh my gosh, there's terrifying poltergeist stories. And anytime we ever get a story where like there's like a physical manifestation of something, oh, I'm out. I'm gone. Good night. Right. I do not do physical things there. But one of the coolest, I think, like stories of like a physical sighting comes from, and you could probably Google this on YouTube. It's from Gettysburg.
Ooh.
And there's a man who is taking video. I can't remember if he was a researcher or not, but it's the video is aimed towards like one of these old cannons right there on the battlefield at Gettysburg, and you can very clearly see some figure, and it's shaped just like a person walking around that particular like area, and it's just so defined. And to me, it's like, I think they've tried to replicate it and they haven't been able to replicate it either. And the reaction from the person is just, it's just so cool, because this is an area that's tied to so much history too. Like the history fanatic in me was like, that makes so much sense. Yes, of course it would be haunted. There's so much death and craziness there. Yes, that would make so much sense. That was one of the ones where I was like, not so much creeped out as I was just like, wow.
Like, that's real.
Wow, that's crazy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've heard other stories about Gettysburg and people's experiences there. And I don't know if it's the same one, but there's another video that like a family that was vacationing and visiting there, and they managed to capture what looked like a line of like Civil War era soldiers like marching through the woods. And then they were like really kind of like transparent, and like the quality of the video isn't all that great. And it's also like zoomed in, and it's like 100 or 200 feet away from where they're standing. But like there's something like moving around out there. And it was like, huh, like that's pretty intense. But yeah, cool. All right. So we're beyond the top of the hour. I think we've been going for a good clip here. And this has been a really awesome and enlightening conversation. So thank you so much, Yami, for coming on the show tonight and talking about all things weird with me.
Thank you for having me. Problem. I love it. I love this.
Yeah, no, it's the life. Yami has agreed to stick around and hang out for a while for Strangeology Beyond, which is the Patreon segment of the show after the regular show is concluded, to talk about some more high strangeness and cryptids, and we're just going to let it flow. So patrons, get ready. And before we sign off here, Yami, can you tell my listeners where they can connect and follow you online?
Yes. So we are most active probably on Instagram. So if you have an Instagram, follow us at Cryptid Chat Girl. We also have a Twitter as of more so recently, that we pretty much post just about the same sort of stuff on Instagram, but we also do like random ramblings. So if you like that sort of stuff, follow at Cryptid Chat on Twitter. And then if anyone that's listening has any stories, anything they want to share, or want to get in contact with us, we also have our email address, so cryptidchatyami@gmail.com. So feel free to follow any of those, or if you just want to shoot us a message and say hi, we also love that too.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, Yami, for coming on the show. And everyone listening, definitely give her a follow on Instagram and Twitter. Check out her show. You can listen to it like anywhere you get podcasts, Spotify, Apple, anywhere. Definitely check her out. There's a lot of cool stuff that she's got coming in the future. So Yami does really awesome work, and we're so glad that she's a part of this community. And we're going to get into some more awesome stuff after we take a short break.
All right. Thanks again, Yami, for coming on the show. Again, give her a follow on her social media. She has an Instagram and a Twitter, and definitely download her podcast. It's a really awesome and fun show, and there's a lot of things you can learn, for sure. All right, now it's time for some shout-outs. First up, without the help of my patrons, taking this show to the next level really wouldn't be possible. So, big thanks to Alex Dorgan, Alyssa, Robin from the Mystic Novelty Company, Christine McTire, Chad from the Appalachian Huntsman, Michael Waddell from MetaZoo Games, Greg Morrill from All the Weird and the Order 66 podcast, Roberto Martinez, Sean Colon, Miranda Jarnot, John Hickenbottom, Sarah Sherg, Maureen Asmat, Daniel Prepared Wolf, and Kathy Howard. If you'd like to become a patron and support the show, go to patreon.com/Strangeology for more information. There's 6 tiers and some really cool rewards like early access to content, exclusive content like the Strangeology Beyond segment of the show, exclusive merch, discounts, and more. And as always, for regular listeners, thank you so much for listening and sharing the show. It means the world to me. We recently blew past 3,000 downloads, which is awesome. So pat yourselves on the back and definitely stick around for more awesome episodes coming in the future. If you'd like to get in touch with me with your own personal stories or feedback, my DMs are always open on Instagram, and you can always send me an email as well at strangeologist@gmail.com. And on another note, I'm also still on the lookout for contributors to my blog over on strangeology.com. So if you'd like to write about the strange and unexplained, definitely get in touch with me. And don't forget to follow me on all the social platforms I'm on, of Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and TikTok. I recently created a private listener group on Facebook, which is growing, and we're trying to make it fun over there, so definitely check that out if you have not done so yet. And if you have any personal stories or encounters with the strange and unexplained, please call into the Strangeology hotline. The number is 802-448-0612. Again, that's 802-448-0612. The hope here is to compile a collection of different cool and interesting stories for a future episode. Kind of like the listener stories episode I did early on, where people emailed me different things that happened to them. So definitely want to do that again, this time with the hotline. There's a 3-minute time limit on the voicemail, so if your story does take longer than that, just call back and leave another message picking up where you left off. So that'd be awesome if you could call in, and thanks for your interest in that and taking the time to do so. And that's it for the free part of the episode today. Thanks for tuning in. For patrons, stick around after the break for Strangeology Beyond. Yami and I get into more fortean topics and high strangeness surrounding flying humanoids. So until next time, take care of yourselves and each other, and keep it strange.
right. Welcome back, patrons, to the exclusive Strangeology Beyond segment of the show, where we like to get weird. So, Yami, thanks again for chatting tonight and sticking around to go over some more